Hi everyone, here's an in-depth look at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park in the Radical SR8. The setup is identical to the Mosport default setup, and the weather is 78 ambient and 80 track, which is consistent with default and the set date and time. I ran a whole fuel run, starting at full fuel and running it down, and this is the best lap time. Just nothing too trick on the last corner. If you don't want to, if you run too wide here, you can really compromise your entry onto the straight, which kind of costs you all the way down to turn one. I actually did miss the apex here a little bit, but it didn't really cost me too much. Now into turn one, I'm taking a bit of a wider line. I've noticed watching a lot of the other lap videos around here, a lot of people really like to run the car like in here and kind of clatter it over the curb. Now I definitely see why they're doing it, and it may work for their style, but I tend to find it puts a bit too much exit understeer on the car. So I want to take a little bit of a later apex and keep the car smooth without going too much up and over the curb. If you're running it over there, sort of more the middle of the car on the curb, I tend to find it pushes it in the apex, and you've got to put too much lock in to stop the tyres running across the track. So just modulating the throttle a little bit, you can't quite hold it flat through here, but it can take a really nice kind of wider line with a medium apex and carry a lot of speed. So using the curb and nice and smooth and not really jumping the car over the curb and running the car out. Now you're wanting to immediately get to the right hand side of the track and enter in tight to the apex. If you've got a good run through this last corner, you'll be carrying a fair bit of speed in here. So bringing it in and kind of holding a fairly tight line. And although it's tempting to kind of run the car out here, particularly if you enter with a lot of speed, if you get this corner spot on, you should maybe lift a touch on entry and just hold a nice tight line through here with the car moving at most to about the middle of the track. The gradient on the track gives you actually an excellent line to follow. It's kind of surprising with this car, actually, once you get it loaded up, because it does feel a bit understeery initially, like it's reluctant to turn into the corner, but once you get it online, it can hold a fair bit of apex speed through there, and it really doesn't try and understeer. It's just kind of caressing it into the initial apex, and then holding the line. Now on here, I'm wanting to sort of trail brake the car a little bit just to get the weight forward, because it is reluctant to initially turn in, and you're wanting to bring it to a fairly late apex. If you bring it to an early apex, it could cause it to understeer off the exit, and there's that grass catching you, and it's very easy just to put your left rear wheel in that grass, which will spin you and potentially ruin your race. So I'm just trailing it a little bit on entry just to give a bit of weight transfer, and trying to take a late apex where I can go full throttle and drive the car straight off the corner, which allows you to use the whole track. But at no point there was I really getting too close to the exit. It was running a nice wide line, but it wasn't really concerningly close to the grass. Just a late apex and drive it straight off the corner. Now down through here, you just hold it left, no problem flat through there, not a problem at all. Now you're wanting to come up here and on the downshifts kind of trail it in. So I've got a fair bit of steering lock on here and I'm still releasing the brake. Fairly high peak brake pressure, and slowly trailing it down. Now, again, people like to take this corner a little bit differently. I tend to prefer a bit more smooth flowing lines, but I have seen a lot of people, very fast drivers mind you too, so it's working for them, sort of throw it to a hard initial apex here and get that corner early, let it kind of understeer late off wide and then more straight in the exit. I tend to prefer to take a bit of a later apex on entry, which doesn't quite understeer the car out as wide because it's still kind of on this middle of the track bit, but the car flows through these corners. and it does use most of the track. You're getting it out too far wide, but I have found there's a bit of a risk if you use all of this track and you happen to grab a wheel on the dirt. You really can, it'll spin and it'll catch the car. And sometimes if you go a bit too wide, you're not going to be able to bring it to this apex here, which is very important. If you're even about half a meter wide, this apex, it can cost you a tenth or two. So I'm trailing it into the corner, keeping a nice smooth line with a late apex, not really troubling that initial apex, and kind of more being concerned about setting the car up for this exit here. Now I grabbed that second apex completely, I'm right on it, but I don't hit the apex, hit the curb and bounce the car. So it just moves through there smoothly. And I'm a bit patient on the throttle when I exit. It's very easy to just slam it and you'll spin. And actually I did hit the throttle hard and spin, which I got a loss of control for towards the end of the run when I was trying to get every little millisecond out of the car. But realistically, you can be a little bit hesitant on the throttle there, and it will just grab the grip at the rear end and and give you a good run up the hill. Now, this car does continue to get quicker as the run goes on, so it starts a bit understeery, and although the tyres will wear, the burn of the fuel actually decreases the lap time more than the tyre wear does. So I think by the end of the run, it is starting to get a little bit, you don't quite have as much rear grip, but overall it is faster. Now just a nice run up the hill, just sticking to the right. Although this is a very simple track, it can catch you. Like, it has a really nice rhythm when you're getting everything right, you're running the car on line, you're not over pushing it. But if you're starting to really fight the car, or having to bring it in from a too wider apex, the front end of this car doesn't quite like it. So in this corner, I approach it quite differently to what I would in an open wheeler. I'm more used to entering a bit wider and running a bit more wider line. The open wheelers can really bring the front end around and clip that second apex, but this just does not have the front end grip to be able to do that. So you've got to enter a bit more narrow, get closer to this first apex and hold like a fairly tight to medium line through here, which will allow you to carry maximum speed. It's very important to get the second apex. The first apex you don't really have to worry about too much, but the second one will really define how the left-hander goes. So you get this second apex, just trying to carry as much speed as you possibly can through here, quickly back in the throttle just to use all the available apex speed. Now it's very important to get your transition into the left-hander because you want to be entering from the right-hand side of the track. If you are a little bit too deep in and hot into this corner, the car might try and understeer at around here and you're out at this point, and then you don't get as wider entry into the left-hander, which can really cost you time. So you've got to hug this right-hand apex to set yourself up to the optimal entry into the left-hander. Now I've got that left-hander perfectly there. Again, you're not wanting to clip it, you're just wanting to get very close to it with just mildly touching the curb. But if the car gets up on the curb and it bounces the front end, that's going to cost you a lot of time. So you transition from the right hand to the left hand and then you go immediately to the left, because getting this final apex is very important. It's very easy to put together a great lap here, but just try and carry a bit too much speed into here or not enter from as wide as you can and miss this apex, and then that marks up your whole lap. And with this whole corner complex here, if you're offline, for instance, you haven't quite got this apex, then you're trying to fight it and the car's sort of understeering a little bit towards this apex and it's kind of running about a meter wider than it needs to be, or 2 meters wide, then you're not on your optimal entry into the final right-hander. So you're trying to enter from a narrower line, which again means you have to turn more angle and the car will typically either miss the apex or understeer off the track at the exit. And that can cost you quite a bit of time. So you hit your apexes, and that's probably the most important thing to do around here. So you enter from the far left, just slow and steady, don't be too aggressive, but make sure the car rotates. I don't believe I'm using the brake. I am just slowing a speed, but I'm not really trail braking it in. I'm just letting the car rotate itself. Rotates itself into the apex. Nice smooth drive out. That's a lap. So this is a great lap in this car. I really like this track. This car, although it does have a little bit more understeer than the Formula cars, it still generates plenty of downforce to be fun and smooth around here. And the more laps you do, the more you find yourself giving lesser movements, just using the brakes to sort of trail brake the front end, just to give it a bit of rotation, and you just get quicker and quicker as you go on. Here's a lap in full speed. And also, in the races, please don't try and dive down the inside of the first corner. This is not a good overtaking position, and I hate it when people try that. Usually ends up in both cars in the wall.